Dope. Hmm. Oh, now the camera's on. Why isn't it showing? Oops, wrong button. How did I? No, it was here. No, no, that's not. That's not you. Just don't know where the options are. Oh, there it is. Nah, there we got it. Even though it's blurry as hell. Alright, so I've been saying I was going to do this for a little while. I finally brought my book in. It's got all of the memories, and I've been looking at this all day. As much as I could, anyway. And there's some on here that's like, why did I write that down? I can't remember what it means. Also, I'm stuffed up, so everything's going to sound weird. So I'm going to move this a little closer. So, I think what I'll do is I'll just start with things that are not driving related. Probably the first one, and all I did was write down bonsai. When I was young, I was over at my buddy's house, and we were playing. There's just three of us. We're just shooting pucks, tennis balls, I guess. And we've been outside for a couple of hours, and my buddy's grandmother, who he lived with, she'd gone somewhere, I don't know, groceries or something like that. But we were cleaning up. We were going to go back in the house and do something else. And we had equipment all over the driveway, really long driveway. And we're picking it up, and my buddy, he's got his hockey stick down, and he leans down and he picks up a glove on the end of the hockey stick, and he's going to throw it down the driveway to get it to where everything else was. And he yells, "Bonsai," as he throws it. And as he throws it, the stick turns to the left, and the glove comes off and goes straight through one of the windows in the house, right in the veranda. And there was a lot of swearing and oh shits and stuff like that. So we all panic, and we tried to get into the house to get the glove, and we realized the door was locked. So we were actually locked out of the house except for the window that was now recently broken. So we sent the little guy, the smallest of us, sent him in there. He unlocked the door and let us in. The next one is one of those. If I wouldn't have seen it, I wouldn't have believed it. When I was in high school, the entire school got the hockey tickets. They got free tickets to one of the WHL teams, the Moose Jaw Warriors. And three of my buddies and I went, and we went to watch the game. Now, we got there early, and we're just wandering around. The rink back then wasn't very big. The stadium only held 2,000 people, and that was with standing room. So we're walking around during warm up, and there's pucks everywhere. You can hear them hitting the glass, and we're walking behind one of the nets. My three buddies are behind me, and I'm in front of them, and I turn around. I don't know why, and I'm walking backwards as I'm talking to them, and a puck comes over the glass, hits the wall, bounces down in front of one of my friends, bounces up, hits him square in the nuts, and just dropped him. I mean, if I hadn't seen it, I wouldn't have believed it. It's just one of those unlucky things that happens. Actually happened to him a lot that first year. Same guy, actually. This one I did to him. We were on the stage crew, so we moved during the plays. We moved the stage, the sets on and off, and because we were in grade 9, the grade 12s rookied us, so they did various things to people. And for him, because his legs were really hairy, they lifted up his pants and they duct taped his legs together right on the hair, and then they made him hop around the stage, which is not that bad, but trying to get the duct tape off his legs was very painful. And I came up to him, and this is while the play was going on, and he's sitting back there, and there's like 2 or 3 people trying to help him get this duct tape off his legs. And I'm like, that looks painful. You need a hand? And he's like, yeah, sure. So I grabbed an end, and then I just ran. And I got most of the tape off, and apparently most of the hair on his legs too, for about 6 months. I actually found that very funny. He did not, though. So I guess we'll get into the driving stuff, which is, I was in a driving instructor for almost 10 years. I actually thought there'd be a lot more stuff on here, but everything that happened to me as an instructor was tied, like the memory was tied to a location, so I had to drive around with students, and when I remembered it, I had to write it down. So we'll just kind of pick one here. I trained a woman, and I think she was in her mid-30s. She was a European woman, and she just had 4 lessons, so 4 brush-up lessons. So they work a little differently. Basically, whatever that person wanted to work on, that's kind of what we worked on in that lesson. So I said, on her first lesson, okay, this is how it works. So basically, you're the boss. Whatever you want to work on, that's what we'll work on. And we're driving along, and I think it was about an hour in, and we come up to a 3-way stop. And I said to her, okay, who has the right of way? And she said, I do. And she was right. We were the only one there. And I said, okay, how come? And she said, because I'm the boss. And I was almost in tears laughing. I mean, she was right, but I was not expecting that. One of the things that kind of happened, I don't know if this is funny or not, but it is kind of a holy crap. I also have a Class 1 license, and I worked for one of the companies here doing city pickup and deliveries. And I think it was about this time of year, and I was done my deliveries, and I was going back, and it was about 4:30, maybe 5 o'clock. And there was a snowstorm. It was snowing, there was a lot of wind. I'm going down on the edge of the city on a 2-lane road with just a day truck, so it only had 1 axle. No, it had 2 axles. It was a big day truck, but the trailer was really small, just 1 axle at the back. And I'm driving along this road, and the speed limit was 80, but everybody was doing like 50. and I'm just kind of putting along, and I just happen to look in my right mirror, and the trailer is not behind me; it is now in the ditch, and I'm pulling it. I had didn't even feel anything, so I was like, "Oh shit!" and moved to the left, and the trailer came up out of the ditch and followed me along. But I had to ride the center line all the way down that road until I got to a more populated area, which is the only time that ever happened to me. It was just weird because the trailer was empty. It was basically a big empty sale. All right. So I had one student. This kid drove me bonkers. He was a baseball player. I figured him and I would get along really well, but no, he was just kind of a dick. But we're coming along, and we're coming up to a three-way stop. And I said, okay, at the stop sign, we're just going to keep going straight. And in his head, that meant, at the stop sign, don't stop. So we get up to it, and we get really, really close, and I slam on the brakes, and he looks at me like I'm crazy. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, you told me to keep going. I'm like, no, you have to stop at the stop sign. Yeah, I wanted to throw him out a window. Um, this is actually one of the ones. It's basically just a guy thing, I think. I don't know, but I had this one guy, and he was. I don't know how to describe him. Basically, your basic nerd. So he had no upper body strength, like no strength whatsoever. Um, really smart though. Like he was working on one of those little Google eye patches. He was building one of those. Um, but I got him in the car. He was 19, I think, when I started training him, and his mom was tired of driving him around. So it was basically his mom making him get his driver's license. And the first two lessons, all he did was bitch and complain. He's like, give me an Xbox controller, I can do this. And he was all over the road, and he just didn't want to be there. So after the second lesson, he canceled the lessons, and I didn't see him again for a little while. And a few months later, I got a phone call from his mom, and she wanted me to keep going with him. And I texted him and phoned him, and I just didn't get anything back. And then about 6 months later, I got a phone call from him, and he wanted to do the lessons again. So I was a little skeptical that because he only had 5 lessons, and to go from 0 to being able to pass in 5 lessons is usually tricky. But I went and picked him up for his third lesson, and he was a completely different dude. Like, he was so into it. He wanted to be there, he wanted to do everything, and he learned really fast. And come to find out that there was a girl in one of his classes, because he was going to uni, or university. There was a girl in one of his classes that he liked, but she went out with this other guy because in this kid's mind, the other guy had a car. So now he was motivated to get his license. So, I mean, to me, it didn't matter, but it's just kind of funny the way a guy's brain will work sometimes. There was one day in one of the summers, and I went and picked up my student, and right beside her house, basically almost right beside where I parked, there was a very large pothole. And as I pulled up, there was a couple of city trucks that pulled up, and they had all the equipment to fix the pothole. And then, just as we started doing a walk around the car, a dump truck showed up, and it had all the materials that they needed to fill the asphalt and everything in it. And the driver was sitting in the truck, and it was running, and my student and I are doing the walk around, and We're standing on the road close to the truck, and the driver, I guess he got tired of waiting, and he set the park brake on the dump truck. Now, if you've ever heard that, it makes a big noise. Now, I've driven trucks, so I was prepared for it. My student, on the other hand, was not, and she jumped about that far. Well, about that far. And, yeah. Unfortunately, the driver got out of the dump truck and he just had to say something, which ruined the moment. But, I had on here spider, but I have no idea what that means. Oh, there's another really random thing that I don't know if it's funny. I mean, it was hilarious at the time. It's kind of a sensitive thing, but I'll explain it. My friend, his son, I guess when he was about 3 or 4, is when 9/11 happened. And I was over at his house in the day because I was truck driving at the time, and I was just killing time and talking with my friend and his wife. Or just I think it was just his wife. And from the basement, we could hear this weird noise. It was like a clink, clunk, 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 clunk. And she didn't want to go down and look. I guess she was comfortable or something like that. So I go downstairs, and the son he's got a 2x4, and it's about maybe 2.5 feet tall. And then he's standing it up, and then he's taking one of his toy planes and he's crashing it into the 2x4 and making it fall over. So I go back upstairs and I tell the wife what is going on, and you can't get mad at him because he doesn't know what it is. And if you were alive at that time, it was on TV almost 24/7 for 2 or 3 weeks. So I mean, he's just imitating what he's seeing on TV. But we had to explain to him what it actually meant and everything like that. But in his mind, it was just something to do. Okay, on that one. I had one guy, and this kid, he was 15, and he was girl crazy. Like, he was just. we made a left turn. It was a big intersection, so there was a turning lane. There was 2 lanes going straight on both sides, and turning lanes. So it was a fairly large intersection. We make the turn, going into the left lane, and then on the side of the road, on the sidewalk, there's 2 girls just walking. And he damn near drove into them because he was looking at them. So it is true what they say. What you look at, you're going to drive towards. Had to yell at him at the last second to get him back onto the road. And that sets up the next part of the story. So I trained him in the summer. So on one of the lessons, because he had a lot of lessons, I took him down. It's not really downtown. We call it the Red Mile. It's after Flames games during the playoffs, people go down there and they just party all the way up and down the road. There's all kinds of bars and restaurants. It's also there's a really posh area. Lots of shops and stuff like that. Rich, really expensive shops. So we're driving down there one day, and unbeknownst to me, it's the exact same time as the Adult Expo, which is basically Comic-Con for porn stars. And we're driving down this road, and it's a Saturday. It's packed. So we're doing maybe 15 kilometers an hour. And we come up to a red light, and I look off to the side, and there's about 12 of these girls from the Adult Expo. And you can tell because it actually says Adult Expo on their ass. And they're wearing sports bras and yoga shorts, and then white socks and white shoes. And they crossed in front of us, like they jaywalked in front of the car. I thought this kid's head was gonna explode right there. It actually happened uh, twice in a different area. A little while later, uh, this time it wasn't as busy, but they still jaywalked in front of us. I thought he was gonna have a heart attack. Uh, this is actually one that you can do with your friends or something like that. If especially if a conversation's boring, you know. I had one student, and I hadn't seen him in a few months, maybe 5 or 6 months, because he needed the time. He only had 5 lessons, and he needed practice in between. Some people do, some people don't. Um, and I pick him up first thing in the morning, Saturday morning at 8 o'clock, and we're going downtown. And I'm asking him questions. Okay, how far do we need to look? You know, what lane are you turning into? What do we got to do when we turn? And it was just question after question after question, and then we're going along, and he's getting them all right. He's getting in there, and I slipped in. I was like, okay, what do we got to do here? What color's the light? And then I said, what's the price of tea in China? And there was this pause as he processed what I had actually said to him. And then he was like, what? And it completely changed the mood of the car. Like, it was good, I don't know, 5 minutes where we were laughing. So, if you're ever in a situation where that happens, you can just throw that in there and it'll change what happens. One of the things I have in here is BMW. If you've ever been on the road and there's been a Beamer around you, you probably know what I mean. The job I had before I became an instructor, I delivered for a company called SPUD. It stood for Small Potatoes Urban Delivery or Sustainable Products or whatever. Basically, we delivered organic food to people's houses. And Mondays and Tuesdays, we went downtown to the offices and delivered basically fruit to different offices and stuff like that. Most of the time, it was bananas. But one of the companies, for some reason, and it was an oil company, they had ordered an English long cucumber, and it was freaking huge. Now I go into this one place where these guys had ordered, and the secretary, this was my favorite place to go. The secretary looked like Sophia, I think it was Sophia Vergara. Just absolutely gorgeous. Even the same type of accent. She had a ring on her finger the size of my head, though. But what would happen, I would go in there, we'd say hi and everything like that, and then we'd go into this little, it's almost like a kitchenette. She would take all the fruit out of the box, put it down on their table, and then give me the box, and I would leave. But this day, she picks up the cucumber, and she's holding it like this, and she's staring at it, and she gets this weird look on her face. And I said to her, did you just have a dirty thought? And she was like, maybe. I'm like, shit. Now I'm not going to be able to work the rest of the day. I trained these two brothers, and they were extremely tall. Like, one was 6'6", and he wasn't really, he wasn't tall and skinny, but he wasn't fat. And then his older brother was 6'7", and he was tall and skinny. But the guy that was 6'6", he said he was cursed. Now, I don't actually think this is a curse, but it did happen a lot. So we would be driving, and we'd come up to a light, and the light would be red. So we'd be pulling up to it, and just as he'd get to maybe between 5 to 10 kilometers from stopping. So it'd be, 6, 7 kilometers an hour. The light would turn green. And that's what he said he was cursed with. He said he was cursed with it always turning green just before he stopped. So I don't think it's a curse. But it did happen a lot. People in backseat. I yeah, I did train one guy. He was actually pretty close to my age. I think he was about 2 years younger than I was at the time. Well, I guess he still would be. But, he was a head chef downtown on Stephen Avenue, I think they call it. It's a really high end job. And they had moved out to the suburbs because they were having kids and they didn't want to raise the kids in an apartment building. But the guy had a stutter. Now I'm not knocking anybody that has a stutter. I mean, I realize it is if you have one, it's a pain in the ass. But one of the things that he seemed to take great pride in telling me about all the waitresses he made cry the night before, which I don't understand why that's accessible, or not accessible, acceptable in the food industry, yelling at people like that. But, But the thing that confused me is, how do you yell at somebody when you have a stutter like that? Like, when you're mad, does it just come all out? Or because if somebody's yelling at me and they're stuttering halfway through it, I'm not going to be intimidated or scared. But other than that, he was a really nice guy. So, I had this one girl, and she was a really by the book type person. If it said to do this, she did exactly like that. She did exactly that. There was no getting around it. And I think she had 7 lessons, and on the 5th lesson we do what is called an independent drive. So I tell them, okay, we're gonna start here, and then I want you to drive from here to this place. You can plan the route, you can go any way you want, but we just have to end up there. So we're in the middle of her independent drive, and we're on one of the main roads here, and at the time the speed limit was 80, but there was a red light in the middle of it, which was annoying. They've recently fixed that. So we come up to that light and we have to stop, and I look behind us and there's a carload of kids, teenagers behind us, and they all look very disappointed that they're stuck behind a driver's ed car. I should tell you, the car that I had at the time was a Dodge Dart. It was a 2013 Dodge Dart, 2.4. If you've never driven one, they do live up to the name. They were very quick off the line. Not as fast as a Mazda 3, but still pretty quick. So I look back, and we're surrounded by cars. Now, we're at the very front. So I said to her, all right, when the light turns green, I want you to put your foot to the floor and hold it there until we get to the speed limit. And she looked at me like, what? I'm like, yeah, just do it. And she gave me one of those, all right. So the light turns green. She put her foot to the floor. We took off like a bat out of hell. We were through the intersection before anybody behind us got into the crosswalk. And we just barreled along, and she gets up to 80, takes her foot off the gas, and levels out, and I look over at her, and her eyes are as big as plates. And she's got this grin on her face like she got an adrenaline rush for the very first time, and she really liked it. And I was like, oh, shit, I just created a speed demon. But she did really well, though. What else we got in here? There was two times I saw people running on the road. Well, not on the road. The first guy that I saw running, he looked like to be about a guy in his early 20s. And he was running in the center median, which was about a little bit wider than a lane. And he's running scared, looking behind him. And I passed him because he was going this way and I was going this way. And I come up to a red light and I'm like, well, that was really weird. And then I saw another guy chasing him. I'm like, that's strange. And I get up to the light and it's just a 2-lane road. And at the light on the right side, there's a car in the right lane, and then beside him is another car, and it looks like they're touching. And the second car that's on the shoulder is just, it's like a project car of a 20-year-old that's never going to get fixed. So what I'm assuming is the young guy tried to squeeze in there, and it started beaking off, and the other guy just, it got heated. The second time, the guy wasn't running from just a random person. He was actually running from the cops. So we're coming down this road. We're coming down a little hill. We're not going very fast. I think we were doing a downhill park. And at the end of the street, and it was only maybe, like the street that we were on was maybe only 6 houses. So it was pretty small. But at the end of the street, 2 cops come around the corner. One parks on the left side, one parks on the right side. They're both facing us. And they go into this house they go up to a house. It's about 2 houses from us, so we can kind of see what's going on. They knock on the door and then go inside, and then about 3 seconds later, a dude comes from the side of that house and runs across the street and then down the street and around the corner and disappears. And it was about this time of year, but it wasn't. I guess it would have been about April. It wasn't cold, but it wasn't hot. But you definitely needed a coat, and he did not have his on. So I'm assuming whatever was going on, he did not want to be there with the cops. And actually, I'll give you kind of a weird stat that I found absolutely flabbergasted. So I was an instructor for 9.5 years. And in that time, did not see one collision. Now, basically did about 1,000 hours a year of teaching. So 9,500 hours of being on the road and not witnessing a collision. Now, one happened in front of us. We just didn't see it. The light turned green. There was a car in front of us. It was an older Jeep that had been fixed up. The light turned green. The student looked to the left. I looked to the right. And when we looked back, the guy in front of us had been T-boned. And he'd been hit by a Porsche SUV. And the only one that was injured was the woman that was driving the Porsche. She was fairly short and was close to the steering wheel, and the airbag smacked her in the face. And that's the only time I ever saw that anything like that happen, which is insane. They figure, the company that I worked for, they figured that each instructor trained between 300 to 500 students a year. So, 4,500 students is not unreasonable. So, that's a lot of people. Let's see, what else can I do here before I leave? On all of the vehicles that I had, we would do an under the hood check. So we pop it up, pop the hood. They would say the fluids, point them out, get to kind of what they look like. Sometimes check the oil. And for guys, really not that big of a deal. They could open the hood, close it most of the time. There was some guys that were, not tall enough or strong enough to close it on the first shot. But a lot of the times with the girls, especially with the Jeep, because I have a Jeep Compass now, and it's a little bit higher up, so they have trouble getting the torque, which is it's not an issue. Um, but it seemed like they'd lift it up and then push, and then they wouldn't get it. But it seemed like every time I would say, okay, hit it like it owes you money, they would get it. Almost every single time. Either the first time or the second time after that, they would get it shut. And we always taught that you lower the hood down until it clicks and then give it a shove. That way, it's not as damaging on the mechanism. Now, most people don't check under the hood 4 times a day, 5 days a week, or 6 days a week. So, you can get it, about that far and then just drop it. It's not going to damage it. But on a vehicle that gets checked all the time, yeah, it's better to push it down and then just slam it the last little bit. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Hopefully this was enjoyable and a little bit weird. It's one of the things I've wanted to do since I started doing this. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.